Reginald Ashworth's manicured fist struck my jaw like a hammer on steel. The cheerful Christmas music stopped abruptly as 50 of Boston's elite turned to witness my humiliation, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. "You worthless piece of trash!" Reginald roared, his Armani tuxedo still dripping with the water I'd accidentally spilled when I bumped into his chair. "That shirt costs more than you make in 6 months, you clumsy animal." Blood trickled from my split lip as I steadied myself against the marble fireplace, the taste of copper mixing with the shame burning in my chest. Around me, senators, judges, CEOs, and socialites stared in shocked silence, not at Reginald's violence, but at my existence in their sacred space. "Apologize to my father immediately," my wife Isabel hissed, her emerald evening gown shimmering under the twinkling lights of the 12-foot Christmas tree. Her voice carried the same contempt I'd heard for 3 years, the tone reserved for servants who'd forgotten their place. "Clean yourself up and get out," Reginald added, straightening his diamond cufflinks with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never faced consequences. "You don't belong here with civilized people." I touched my bleeding lip, looking around the room at faces that radiated disgust and superiority. Lawyers who'd built fortunes on others' misery. Businessmen who'd crushed competitors without mercy. Politicians who'd sold their souls for campaign contributions. All watching the blue-collar intruder get what they believed he deserved. My name is Connor Briggs. I'm 32 years old, and I've just been assaulted by my father-in-law in front of Boston's most powerful people. But as I stood there, blood on my shirt and shame on my face, I smiled. Because they had no idea of the Christmas present I'd prepared especially for each of them. If you're new to this channel, like this video and subscribe for your daily dose of chilling revenge tales where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished. 6 months later, Reginald Ashworth was serving the first year of a 25-year federal prison sentence for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. His construction empire was dismantled, his fortune seized, and his name became synonymous with elite corruption. But let me take you back to that Christmas party when he made his fatal mistake. 3 years earlier, I should never have been in that ballroom to begin with. I was a union electrician from Southie, the kind of guy who worked with his hands, drank beer instead of wine, and wore work boots instead of Italian leather. The Ashworth family represented everything I'd grown up distrusting: inherited wealth, unearned privilege, and the kind of power that crushed people like me without a second thought. But I'd fallen in love with Isabel. We'd met at a community college class where she was volunteering, part of some rich girls' guild project about giving back to society. I was taking business courses at night, trying to start my own electrical contracting company. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my dreams of building something honest with my own 2 hands. For 6 months we lived in a bubble where class didn't matter. She came to my apartment in Southie, ate pizza, watched Red Sox games, and claimed she preferred my authentic life to her family's artificial world. I believed her when she said she loved me for who I was, not what I had. The bubble burst the night I met Reginald Ashworth. "So you're the electrician," he'd said, looking me up and down like I was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. "Isabel tells me you have ambitions beyond running wire through walls." Reginald Ashworth owned the largest construction conglomerate in New England. Ashworth Development had built half the office buildings, shopping centers, and luxury condos from Boston to Hartford. He sat on city planning boards, donated millions to political campaigns, and wielded the kind of influence that shaped entire neighborhoods. "Yes, sir," I'd replied respectfully, hoping to make a good impression. "I'm starting my own electrical contracting business. Honest work, fair prices, treating customers right." He'd laughed, not with amusement, but with the cruel satisfaction of someone about to crush an insect. "Honest work," he'd repeated as if the words tasted bad. How quaint. "Isabel dear, you need to understand that good intentions don't pay for the lifestyle you're accustomed to." That dinner set the tone for everything that followed. Reginald treated me like hired help who'd forgotten his place. Every family gathering became a masterclass in humiliation. Subtle jabs about my background, pointed questions about my earning potential, and constant reminders that I was temporary entertainment for his daughter's rebellious phase. "Connor doesn't understand investment portfolios," he'd say during dinner parties, smiling while he twisted the knife. "His idea of financial planning is buying lottery tickets." The worst part wasn't Reginald's cruelty, it was watching Isabel slowly absorb his poison. At first she'd defend me, insist that love mattered more than money. But as months passed, I noticed changes. Disappointment when I couldn't afford expensive restaurants. Embarrassment when her friends asked about my work. Questions about why I wasn't more ambitious, or thinking bigger. "Connor, "Daddy offered to loan you money to expand your business," she'd say, using the tone people reserve for stubborn children. "Why are you too proud to accept help?" I knew men like Reginald Ashworth. Their help came with invisible strings that became chains the moment you relaxed. Every dollar borrowed would be held over my head, every favor would become leverage for control. I'd rather stay small and independent than become his puppet. But the real revelation about the Ashworth family came 6 months before the Christmas party that changed everything. I was working late on a renovation project in downtown Boston when I overheard a conversation between two city inspectors. They were discussing Ashworth Development's latest project, a luxury high-rise that had somehow received building permits in record time despite violating several safety codes. "Reginald takes care of his friends," one inspector said, counting a stack of cash. "As long as we keep the paperwork clean, everybody wins." That's when I started paying attention. Over the following months, I began noticing patterns. Ashworth Development consistently won city contracts with suspiciously low bids, then experienced massive cost overruns that the city quietly absorbed. Building inspectors who questioned Ashworth projects suddenly found themselves transferred or fired. Local politicians who initially opposed Ashworth developments would mysteriously change their votes after private meetings. As a union electrician, I worked on dozens of construction sites around Boston. I knew foremen, inspectors, city workers, and contractors, the invisible army of working people who actually built the city while men like Reginald took credit. These people trusted me because I was one of them, and they started sharing information that painted a disturbing picture. Reginald Ashworth wasn't just a successful businessman. He was the center of a criminal network that had been systematically looting Boston for over a decade. The decision to investigate Reginald wasn't born from revenge fantasies. It came from a sense of responsibility to my community. Every dollar he stole through fraudulent contracts was money that should have gone to schools, hospitals, and infrastructure improvements in working-class neighborhoods like mine. I started small, using my industry connections to gather information about Ashworth Development's business practices. Tommy Rodriguez, a concrete inspector for the city, showed me documents proving that Ashworth projects consistently used substandard materials while billing for premium supplies. "Look at this," Tommy said, spreading blueprints across his kitchen table during our after-shift meeting. "The specs call for grade A steel reinforcement, but they're using grade C. The city's paying for the good stuff, but Ashworth's pocketing the difference." Maria Santos, who worked in the city permits office, provided evidence of the acceleration process for Ashworth projects. Applications that should take 6 months were approved in weeks, with fees mysteriously waived and safety requirements overlooked. "He's got people in every department," Maria explained, sliding photocopies across the table. "Building safety, environmental compliance, zoning approval, they all get their envelopes, and suddenly Ashworth's projects move to the front of the line." But the most damaging evidence came from Jackie Murphy, a former Ashworth development accountant who'd been fired for asking too many questions about the company's finances. "It's not just construction fraud," Jackie told me during a clandestine meeting in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. "Reginald's been laundering money for organized crime families for years. Drug profits, illegal gambling, protection rackets, it all gets cleaned through fake construction expenses." She handed me a flash drive containing financial records that would change everything. Bank accounts in the Caymans, shell companies in Delaware, cash payments to city officials, it's all here. Reginald's not just stealing from the city. He's in bed with the Torino crime family. The Torino family controlled illegal gambling, drug distribution, and protection rackets throughout New England. If Reginald was laundering their money, he wasn't just a corrupt businessman, he was an active participant in organized crime. Over the next 4 months, I built a comprehensive case while pretending to be the bumbling blue-collar husband Reginald expected me to be. During family dinners, I listened carefully to his phone calls and business conversations. During holiday visits, I installed listening devices in his home office. During Isabel's birthday party, I photographed documents he'd left carelessly on his desk. The evidence was staggering. Reginald had been systematically defrauding the city of Boston for over 12 years, stealing an estimated $47 million through inflated contracts, substandard materials, and phantom employees. The money was laundered through a network of legitimate businesses and eventually used to purchase luxury properties, expensive artwork, and offshore investments. But the criminal network extended far beyond Reginald. 3 city council members, 2 planning board officials, and the deputy mayor were all receiving regular payments. Federal Judge Hamilton Blackwood was approving questionable land deals in exchange for campaign contributions to his son's political campaigns. Police Captain Frank Morrison was providing protection for Torino family operations. I had documented evidence of the largest municipal corruption scandal in Boston's history. The most challenging part wasn't gathering evidence, it was maintaining my cover while watching Reginald's daily humiliations. Every family dinner became a performance where I had to appear grateful for insults, respectful toward contempt, and oblivious to the criminal conversations happening around me. "Connor's so simple," Reginald would say, laughing with his corrupt business partners. "He thinks honest work builds character. Poor bastard has no idea how the real world operates. If only he knew I was recording every word." The breaking point came 3 weeks before the Christmas party. Isabel announced that she wanted to reassess our marriage, and suggested we consider whether we were truly compatible in the long term. Her words sounded rehearsed, clearly influenced by months of her father's psychological manipulation. That night I made my final decision. I contacted FBI agent Christina Volkov, who specialized in organized crime and government corruption. "Mr. Briggs," she said after reviewing a sample of my evidence, "this is exactly the kind of case we've been trying to build against the Ashworth organization for years. Are you prepared to cooperate fully, including testifying as a federal witness?" I was prepared for everything except what happened at the Christmas party. The annual Ashworth Christmas party was legendary among Boston's elite, an invitation-only gathering where power brokers made deals, politicians courted donors, and the wealthy celebrated their superiority over the masses. This year's guest list included Senator Bradford Wells, Federal Judge Hamilton Blackwood, Mayor Catherine Lynch, and 50 other influential figures who shaped New England politics and business. I shouldn't have been there, but Isabel had insisted I attend as part of keeping up appearances while she decided whether to divorce me. The hypocrisy was perfect. She wanted me present to avoid social embarrassment while privately planning to abandon our marriage for someone from her own class. The Ashworth mansion in Beacon Hill was decorated like something from a luxury magazine. Crystal chandeliers, imported Italian marble, artwork worth more than most people's houses, and a Christmas tree that cost more than my annual salary. Everywhere I looked, I saw luxury paid for with stolen tax dollars and laundered crime money. "Connor, try not to embarrass us tonight," Isabel had whispered as we entered the ballroom. "These people are important to Daddy's business. Important to his criminal enterprise," I thought, recognizing several faces from my investigation files. The evening began with the usual social performance. Reginald holding court like a king, regaling his criminal associates with stories of successful business deals that were actually descriptions of municipal fraud. Corrupt politicians mingling with organized crime money launderers. Judges who'd sold their integrity socializing with businessmen who'd bought their verdicts. I played my assigned role perfectly, the simple electrician grateful to be included in such distinguished company. I smiled at their condescending jokes, nodded respectfully at their lectures about understanding business, and appeared appropriately intimidated by their displays of wealth and power. What they didn't know was that I was memorizing faces, recording conversations, and gathering final evidence for the federal case that would destroy them all. The confrontation began over nothing, a simple accident that revealed the class hatred simmering beneath their polite facades. I was walking behind Reginald's chair, carrying a glass of water from the bar, when someone bumped into me from behind. The water spilled across Reginald's shirt and onto his expensive Italian leather shoes. A minor mishap that should have been resolved with apologies and a napkin. Instead, Reginald exploded with the rage of a man who'd been waiting years for an excuse to put me in my place. "You clumsy piece of trash," he roared, rising from his chair as the entire ballroom fell silent. "Look what you've done to my shirt." The humiliation was calculated, designed to destroy whatever dignity I had left in front of Boston's most powerful people. He wanted everyone to see the blue-collar intruder getting what he deserved. "I'm sorry," I began, reaching for a napkin. "It was an accident." That's when his fist connected with my jaw. The punch sent me stumbling backward into the marble fireplace, blood flowing from my split lip as 50 witnesses stared in shocked silence. Not shocked at the violence, shocked that it had taken this long. "That shirt costs more than you make in 6 months, you clumsy animal," Reginald continued, his face flushed with the satisfaction of finally asserting his dominance publicly. I steadied myself against the fireplace, tasting blood and feeling the weight of every contemptuous stare in the room. These people weren't horrified by what they'd witnessed, they were entertained. The class war they'd been fighting in private had finally exploded into the open. "Apologize to my father immediately," Isabel demanded, her voice carrying 3 years of accumulated shame about her choice in husbands. I looked around the room at the faces of Boston's criminal elite. Corrupt politicians who'd sold their votes. Judges who'd perverted justice. Businessmen who'd built fortunes on stolen tax dollars. All united in their contempt for the working-class man who dared to marry above his station. But as I stood there, blood on my shirt and their hatred surrounding me like a fog, something fundamental changed inside me. The humiliation I'd endured for 3 years crystallized into perfect clarity. These people weren't my betters. They were criminals who'd convinced themselves that wealth justified their crimes. "You're right," I said calmly, wiping blood from my lip with the back of my hand. "I don't belong here with people like you." I walked toward the ballroom exit, ignoring their murmurs of satisfaction and Isabel's mortified expression. But before I reached the door, I turned back to address the room one final time. "Enjoy your party," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the marble floor. "It's the last Christmas you'll be celebrating as free people." The confused silence followed me all the way to my truck. As I drove through the snow-covered streets of Boston, my phone was already ringing with calls to FBI agent Volkov, federal prosecutor Maria Santos, and investigative journalist Kevin Murphy from the Boston Globe. The assault had been the perfect capstone to months of evidence gathering. Reginald Ashworth had just sealed his own fate in front of 50 witnesses, and tomorrow morning, the most comprehensive federal corruption investigation in Boston's history would begin. The federal operation began at dawn on December 27 with coordinated raids across Boston. FBI agents executed search warrants at Ashworth Development, 3 city offices, 2 banks, and 12 private residences. The investigation I'd helped build became the foundation for Operation Clean House, the largest municipal corruption case in New England history. Agent Volkov called me at 6:15 a.m. as the raids were beginning. "Connor, it's happening. 23 federal search warrants, 47 agents, and forensic accountants from 3 different agencies. Your evidence is making this possible." I turned on the morning news to watch federal agents carrying boxes of documents out of Reginald's corporate headquarters. The same building where I'd been dismissed as a simple electrician was now the center of a criminal investigation that would dominate national headlines for months. The media response was immediate and devastating. Kevin Murphy's expose in the Boston Globe hit newsstands at 7 a.m. with the headline, "The Ashworth Criminal Empire: How Boston's Elite Looted the City." The article detailed decades of systematic fraud, complete with names, dates, amounts, and photographic evidence I'd helped provide. By 8 a.m., every major news network was covering the story. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all featuring the same images of federal agents raiding the offices of Boston's most respected businessman. The man who'd punched me for spilling water was now the face of elite corruption and organized crime. Reginald's first reaction was predictably arrogant. He called me at 9:30 a.m., his voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "You working-class piece of garbage," he snarled into the phone. "You have no idea what you've done. I have connections in every agency, every courthouse, every level of government. You'll be destroyed before this ever reaches trial." "Reginald," I replied calmly, "you're talking to a federal witness in an organized crime investigation. I suggest you call a lawyer instead of making threats." His next call proved just how desperate he'd become. "Connor, let's be reasonable about this," he said, his tone shifting to forced friendliness. "I may have overreacted at the party. Perhaps we can work something out. I'm prepared to offer you $5 million to reconsider your cooperation with the federal investigation. Attempted bribery of a federal witness. Another felony to add to his growing list of charges." "Agent Volkov," I said, immediately calling my FBI contact, "I need you to hear the recording I just made of Reginald Ashworth offering me $5 million to withdraw my cooperation." The bribery attempt triggered an additional federal investigation into witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. What had started as a municipal corruption case was expanding into a full-scale organized crime prosecution. But Reginald's problems were just beginning. The forensic accountants discovered that his financial crimes extended far beyond Boston. Shell companies in 12 states, offshore accounts in 6 countries, and money laundering operations that processed over $200 million in criminal proceeds over 15 years. The Torino crime family connections led to additional federal investigations in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York. Judge Hamilton Blackwood was arrested at his country club during a golf tournament. The photographs of him being handcuffed in front of his wealthy friends became symbolic of the entire scandal. Deputy Mayor Russell Kane was arrested during a city council meeting. Police Captain Frank Morrison was perp-walked out of police headquarters in front of television cameras. The political earthquake spread beyond Boston. Senator Bradford Wells announced his resignation after evidence emerged of his involvement in land deals that benefited Torino family enterprises. 3 congressmen, 2 state senators, and the governor's chief of staff were implicated in various aspects of the conspiracy. But the most satisfying moment came when Isabel called me, crying hysterically. "Connor, they've frozen all our assets," she sobbed into the phone. "The FBI seized the house, the cars, even my jewelry. Daddy's lawyers say he's going to prison for decades." "Isabel," I replied, feeling no satisfaction in her misery, "your father has been stealing from schools, hospitals, and working families for 15 years. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" "But I didn't know," she protested. "I never knew about the criminal activity. I'm innocent in all this." Bank records told a different story. Isabel had been receiving monthly payments from Ashworth Development shell companies for years, money she claimed was a family allowance, but was actually laundered criminal proceeds. She'd knowingly benefited from her father's crimes while looking down on the honest work that supported our marriage. The federal prosecutors offered her a plea deal in exchange for testimony against her father, but she'd have to forfeit every luxury item purchased with criminal money and spend 2 years in federal prison. The woman who demanded I apologize for being assaulted was now facing prison time for her role in organized crime. 3 months after the Christmas party, the scope of the Ashworth criminal enterprise was fully revealed. 47 indictments, including organized crime, municipal corruption, money laundering, and conspiracy charges. Asset forfeitures totaling $312 million. Prison sentences ranging from 5 to 30 years. The Boston Globe estimated that Ashworth's crimes had cost taxpayers over $400 million in inflated contracts, substandard construction, and wasted resources. Schools that should have been built were delayed for years. Hospital renovations were completed with dangerous materials. Public housing projects were constructed with defective components that endangered working-class families. Every crime had victims, the working people whose tax dollars had been stolen to fund the lifestyles of criminals who considered themselves superior. The legal resolution was swift and merciless. Reginald Ashworth was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The judge specifically cited his leadership role in a criminal enterprise that systematically defrauded taxpayers while living a lifestyle of obscene luxury. At 62 years old, he would likely die behind bars. Judge Hamilton Blackwood received 18 years for judicial corruption and money laundering. His lifetime appointment had been terminated, his pension forfeited, and his name would be synonymous with justice for sale. Deputy Mayor Russell Kane got 12 years for his role in the bid-rigging scheme that had cost the city tens of millions in inflated contracts. Police Captain Frank Morrison received 15 years for providing protection to organized crime operations while receiving monthly payments from the Torino family. Senator Bradford Wells avoided prison by cooperating with federal investigators, but his political career was over. He resigned in disgrace and became a cautionary tale about corruption in high places. Isabel received a suspended sentence in exchange for testimony and cooperation, but lost everything else. The mansion, luxury cars, designer wardrobe, and jewelry collection were all forfeited as criminal proceeds. The woman who'd grown up with every privilege was reduced to living in a studio apartment and working as a receptionist. But the most satisfying justice was community-wide. The federal asset forfeiture program returned over $200 million to Boston's treasury. The money funded new schools in working-class neighborhoods, hospital renovations with proper materials, and infrastructure projects that actually served the community instead of enriching criminals. Ashworth Development was dissolved and its legitimate assets were sold to honest contractors who promised to maintain ethical business practices. The company that had symbolized elite corruption was replaced by businesses that respected workers and served communities. The construction industry in Boston was transformed overnight. With the Ashworth crime network eliminated, honest contractors could compete fairly for municipal contracts. Bribery and bid rigging became federal crimes with serious enforcement. Worker safety standards were strengthened and actually enforced. Most importantly, the working-class network that had helped expose the conspiracy was vindicated. Tommy Rodriguez became the city's chief building inspector, charged with preventing future corruption. Maria Santos was promoted to head the permits office, implementing transparency measures that made bribery impossible. Jackie Murphy started her own accounting firm specializing in municipal contract oversight. The invisible workers who'd risked their jobs to expose elite corruption were finally recognized as heroes who'd saved their community from systematic criminal exploitation. 2 years after the Christmas party that changed everything, my life had transformed in ways I'd never imagined possible. Briggs Electrical Contracting had grown from a one-man operation into the largest electrical contracting company in New England. With Ashworth Development's criminal network eliminated, honest businesses could compete fairly for municipal contracts. My company won projects based on competitive bids, quality work, and ethical business practices rather than bribes and political connections. But growth hadn't changed my core values. Every employee received fair wages, comprehensive healthcare, and profit-sharing bonuses. Safety standards exceeded federal requirements. Apprenticeship programs provided opportunities for young people from working-class neighborhoods to learn skilled trades. Union membership was encouraged and supported. The difference between my company and Reginald's criminal enterprise was fundamental. He'd built wealth by exploiting workers and stealing from communities. I built success by empowering workers and serving communities. The most meaningful project came when the city awarded my company the contract to renovate 3 schools in Southie, the same neighborhood where I'd grown up. Instead of the substandard materials and dangerous shortcuts that characterized Ashworth projects, these schools received the best components money could buy, installed by union workers earning living wages. "Mr. Briggs," said Maria Sullivan, principal of Thomas Murphy Elementary, "these children are getting the education facility they deserve, built by people who actually care about their future." Standing in that renovated classroom watching kids from my old neighborhood learn in a safe, modern environment, I understood the real difference between inherited privilege and earned success. But the personal transformation was equally significant. 3 months after Reginald's conviction, I met Elena Vasquez at a community meeting about neighborhood improvement projects. She was a civil rights lawyer who specialized in workers' rights and municipal corruption cases. She'd grown up in East Boston, the daughter of immigrants who'd built successful lives through honest work and community involvement. "You did something important," she told me after learning about my role in exposing the Ashworth conspiracy. "You proved that working-class people have the intelligence and courage to hold powerful criminals accountable." Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine compatibility. Elena understood the working-class struggle because she'd lived it. She supported my business success because it was earned through integrity rather than inheritance. 6 months later, when she agreed to marry me, the proposal took place not in some expensive restaurant, but at the community center we'd both helped fund through the recovered Ashworth assets. The ceremony was held in the Union Hall where my father had worked for 30 years, surrounded by the people who'd supported my investigation and shared my commitment to working-class empowerment. The contrast with my first marriage couldn't have been more dramatic. Instead of embarrassment about my background, Elena celebrated my authenticity. Instead of demanding I change to fit her world, she joined me in building something better for our community. 1 year after our wedding, I received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Briggs, this is Warden Thompson from FCI Hazleton. Reginald Ashworth has requested a meeting with you." I almost declined, but curiosity made me accept. What could the man who'd punched me for spilling water possibly have to say from his federal prison cell? The visiting room at the Federal Correctional Institution was nothing like the luxury Reginald had known. Gray walls, metal tables, guards watching every interaction. He looked older, smaller, diminished by the reality of consequences he'd never expected to face. "Connor," he said, his voice lacking the arrogance I remembered, "I wanted to apologize for what I did to you. For how I treated you. You were right about everything." I studied his face, looking for manipulation or deception, but saw only genuine regret. "I spent my entire life believing that wealth made me superior to people like you," he continued. "I thought working with your hands made you less intelligent, that growing up without privilege made you less worthy. I was wrong about all of it." He leaned forward, his hands folded on the metal table. "Prison has taught me something I should have learned decades ago. Real strength comes from integrity, not inheritance. Real success comes from building something honest, not stealing from others. You had those qualities all along. I was too blinded by my own arrogance to recognize them." "Reginald," I replied, "I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change what you did to Boston, to working families, to people who trusted you." "I know," he said quietly. "I know I can never undo the damage I caused. But I want you to know that you were the better man from the beginning. You were always the better man." As I drove home from that prison visit, I reflected on the complete reversal of our fortunes. The man who'd considered me inferior was spending his remaining years behind bars while I was building a legacy of ethical business success and community empowerment. But the real victory wasn't personal, it was systemic. The Ashworth scandal had transformed municipal contracting in Boston and cities across New England. Transparency requirements, competitive bidding processes and federal oversight had made corruption significantly more difficult. Working-class contractors could compete fairly for projects, knowing that bribes and political connections wouldn't determine winners. The recovered assets had funded improvements that directly benefited working families. New schools, upgraded hospitals, improved infrastructure, all paid for with money stolen by criminals who'd considered themselves above the law. Most importantly, the investigation had proved that working-class intelligence, industry knowledge, and community connections could defeat even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. The invisible workers who'd provided evidence had demonstrated their crucial importance in maintaining honest government and ethical business practices. Today, 5 years after that Christmas party, I employ over 400 people in companies across 3 states. Every employee earns a living wage, receives comprehensive benefits, and has opportunities for advancement based on merit rather than connections. Union membership is encouraged. Safety standards are uncompromising. Community involvement is part of our corporate culture. The Briggs companies have become a model for ethical business practices in the construction industry. We're regularly featured in trade publications, business schools, and government reports as an example of how honest work can build lasting success without exploiting workers or cheating communities. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came last month, when the Boston Building Trades Council presented me with their Lifetime Achievement Award for demonstrating that working-class values and business success are not only compatible but essential for building strong communities. As I accepted that award in the same union hall where my father had worked, surrounded by electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and contractors who'd supported my investigation and shared my vision of ethical business, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. It started with a punch in the face from a man who considered me inferior. It ended with that man in federal prison while I stood before my community as an example of what honest work can accomplish. The real Christmas gift wasn't revenge, it was proving that integrity always defeats corruption, that character matters more than connections, and that working-class people have the intelligence and courage to hold powerful criminals accountable. If this story resonated with you, it's because you understand that class warfare is real, and it's usually the wealthy who start the fight. Too many working-class people have experienced the kind of contempt and abuse that Reginald Ashworth represented, the assumption that inherited wealth makes someone superior to earned success. Connor's story shows us that the working-class network is more powerful than elite criminals realize. The contractors, inspectors, city workers, and union members who built the evidence against Ashworth had access to information that no amount of wealth could buy. They proved that invisible workers are actually the backbone of honest government and ethical business. Most importantly, this story demonstrates that true success comes from integrity, not inheritance. Connor built an empire that employs hundreds of people, serves communities, and operates ethically because he never forgot his values or abandoned the people who supported him. Have you ever experienced class-based discrimination or abuse from wealthy people who assumed they were your betters? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and subscribe to Revenge Galore for more stories where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished. Thanks for watching, and remember, the next time someone treats you as inferior because of your background, they might be underestimating exactly who they're dealing with.